we are very, very pleased indeed, as I said earlier, to be able to welcome to our city somebody whose political pedigree in the anti-fascist movement needs absolutely no real introduction. I'm sure Vera is more than adequate to the task of introducing herself and speaking for herself. But I would just like, on behalf of Glasgow, on behalf of Hope Not Hate Scotland, to welcome you so warmly to our city and to ask you to speak to us just now.
I'll do the translation afterwards.
Liebe Interbrigadisten und deren Angehörige, liebe Freunde, liebe Anwesende, ich möchte mich ganz herzlich und auch im Namen meines Mannes für die Einladung bedanken, ganz besonders bei Hope Not Hate Glasgow. Und dass ich bei euch heute sein darf und dass ich ein paar Worte zu euch sprechen darf. Im Oktober diesen Jahres jährt sich zum 80. Mal die Gründung der Interbrigaden 1936 bis 1939 in Spanien. Es war ein Putsch einheimischer Militärs gegen die demokratisch gewählte Volksfrontregierung mit Hilfe oder besser gesagt mit Unterstützung von Hitler und Mussolini. Mehrere tausend Freiwillige aus über 50 Ländern, darunter Männer, Frauen, Kommunisten, Sozialisten, Anarchisten, Parteilose, Juden, Christen, also Menschen aus allen Schichten und Bereichen des Lebens kämpften gemeinsam gegen den europäischen Faschismus. Heute findet man die Faschisierung in ganz anderen Formen vor. So treten die Neonazis von heute als ganz normale Bürger der Gesellschaft in Erscheinung und greifen die sogenannten Probleme der Menschen auf und ihre Lösung endet in Ausländerhass und brennende Flüchtlingsheime. Die Interbrigaden verkörpern noch heute, wofür Ernst Thaelmann gekämpft hatte, die Aktionseinheit aller antifaschistischen Kräfte. Dieses Ziel ist heute so aktuell, wie es damals war. Denn nur gemeinsam sind wir stark. Ein Bataillon der Interbrigaden trug nicht umsonst den Namen von Ernst Thaelmann. Er war ein Internationalist und durch seine Standhaftigkeit und seinen Mut fühlten sich die Interbrigadisten mit ihm verbunden, als wenn er unter ihnen weilte in ihrem Kampf. Ernst Thaelmann sagte, Zitat, es gilt zu begreifen, dass man nicht siegen kann, wenn man nicht gelernt hat, die Vergangenheit zu verstehen. Zitat Ende. Diesen Sieg können wir immer noch nicht feiern. Und steht immer noch ein langer, schwerer Kampf bevor. Es gibt immer noch keinen Frieden auf der Welt. Siehe Krieg in Syrien. Es gibt immer noch nicht die Verfolgung von Andersdenkenden. Es gibt immer noch die Verfolgung von andersdenkenden Menschen, wie in Ungarn das Vorgehen gegen Sinti und Roma. Und es gibt immer noch stark ausgeprägtes rassistisches nationales Denken, wie die Flüchtlingspolitik in Europa in Form von Schließung der Grenzen. Auch die gesamte Islamdiskussion und damit verbunden das Demokratieverständnis nehmen einen großen Platz in der Gesellschaft ein. So wie vor 80 Jahren in Spanien die bürgerliche Demokratie und 1933 in Deutschland außer Kraft gesetzt wurden, damit das Finanzkapital unbegrenzt regieren konnte. Wohin eine Regierung im Ausnahmezustand führt, haben unsere Eltern, Großeltern 1933 erlebt. Weil Ernst Thaelmann es vermochte, die Massen gegen die kapitalistische Ausbeutung und gegen die heraufziehende faschistische Gefahr zu mobilisieren, fürchteten die Nazis ihn und sperrten Ernst Thaelmann 11 Jahre in Einzelhaft. Sie haben ihn ermordet. Sie konnten ihn nicht brechen. Sie können auch heute noch nicht verhindern, dass er in unseren Herzen, Handeln und Kampf immer unter uns sein wird. Die Ziele der Kämpfer von damals sind heute immer noch die von allen friedliebenden, fortschrittlichen, antifaschistischen Menschen. Zum Schluss gebe ich gerne ein Zitat meiner Oma weiter, was auch aus meinem Herzen spricht und was ich immer wiederholen kann. Zitat: Wir werden gemeinsam handeln, um das Leben gegen den Tod zu verteidigen, die Freundschaft gegen Hass, den Frieden gegen den Krieg, denn nichts wird uns daran hindern, für die Zukunft und das Glück unserer Kinder zu kämpfen. Zitat Ende. Viva la Repubblica, no pasaran. Der Kampf geht weiter. La lucha continua, bis wir sagen können, pasaremos. Rotfront.
Dear Inter-Brigaders and relatives, dear friends and comrades, a friendly hello to you all. First of all, I would like to thank you also on behalf of my husband and especially to Hochpartie Greater Glasgow for the invitation to attend this event and the opportunity to say a few words. October this year marks the 80th anniversary of the founding of the International Brigades in Spain in 1936. It was a coup of the local military against the democratic elected Popular Front government with the aid, or rather with the support, of Hitler and Mussolini. Thousands of volunteers from over 50 countries, including men, women, communists, socialists, anarchists, independents, Jews, Christians, basically people from all backgrounds and all walks of life who fought together against fascism in Europe. Today we find the fascist front in very different forms. Today neo-Nazis appear as normal members of our society and offer solutions to the problems of the people. But their solution ends in xenophobia and in burning refugee camps. The International Brigades still embody to this day what Ernst Thälmann, my grandfather, had fought for. Unity and action of all anti-fascist forces. This objective is as relevant today as it was then, because only together we are strong. One battalion of the International Brigades did not carry the name of Ernst Thälmann for nothing. He was an internationalist, and through his unwavering courage, the Inter-Brigaders felt connected to him, as if he was among them in their struggle. Ernst Thälmann said, and I quote, "It is important to understand that you cannot win if you haven't learned to understand the past." Unquote. We can still not celebrate this victory. Before us is still a long uphill battle. There is still no peace in this world. See the war in Syria. There are still persecutions of dissenting people, as in Hungary, where Roma and Sinti are being victimized. There is still a strongly pronounced racist, nationalist thinking present, as shown now when the European refugee policy is to close their borders. The entire discussion about Islam and our understanding of democracy plays a large part in our society. Just as 80 years ago in Spain, or 1933 in Germany, where democracy was ignored so finance capital could govern indefinitely. And what a government in a state of emergency could lead to was experienced by our parents and grandparents in 1933. Because Ernst Thälmann's ability to mobilize the masses against capitalist exploitation and against looming fascist danger, the Nazis feared him and detained him for 11 years in solitary confinement. They murdered him, but they couldn't break him. And still, they cannot prevent to this day that he is in our hearts, our actions and our fights, and always will be. The objectives of the fighters of yesteryear are still the same today for peace-loving, progressive and anti-fascist people like us. Finally, I would like to quote my grandmother, Ernst Thälmann's wife, Rosa, which speaks straight from my heart and which I always quote. We will act together to defend life against death, friendship against hate, peace against war, because nothing will prevent us from fighting for our children's happiness and for their future. Viva la Repubblica!
Viva!
Viva!
No pasaran! The fight goes on. La lucha continua. This is really difficult. Until we can say, pasaremos. Vote front.
I think, comrades, just as the generation of anti-fascists in Germany and in Italy of Ernst Thälmann's generation represented the very best of their class, the very best of their national labour movements, so gatherings like this represent the society of the future, the socialist future that all of us want to see. Because we are better than anything capitalism can offer us. All capitalism can offer us is crisis, inequality and war. That's to be seen in the current situation in Britain and internationally. We are better than they are. Sometimes I think very subjectively we react to things, and sometimes movement appears not to be going sufficiently quickly in the direction that we would wish it was going in. But it is at gatherings like this that we can see the society of the future. The critical element in fighting and for that society and winning that socialist future is the organised labour and trade union movement, and an organisation in Scotland that aims to, as best it can, to coordinate the labour and trade union movement anti-austerity campaign and link it with local communities as the People's Assembly. And so we are very, very pleased indeed to have with us Keith Stoddart, who's going to talk to you about the need to project the left alternative to what's on offer from capitalism. Because as far as we are concerned, what's on offer from capitalism can never be enough. Yes, we can make gains within the system, yes, we can win the odd reform, but let's not forget every single post-war political gain has actually been withdrawn or taken from us. So we, as Vera quite rightly said, it's an uphill struggle, but given sufficient organisation, sufficient unity, sufficient cohesion, we can indeed actually win that society of the future. Keith.
Thank you, Simon, for that. One of the dangers of going last is that many of the things you intended to say have already been said, either in English or in German. However, for a lot of us, the world of 80 years ago seems very, very long ago, and we cannot actually really know what the International Brigaders of today would be doing today. But what we do know is that they came from the organised working class. They were in the main industrial workers. They were involved in the unemployed movement. They were active against the hated means test. They were against slum landlordism. They campaigned for more council houses. They were welcoming refugees when they came off the kinder transport. In all of these activities, they were active. So we can ask ourselves the question, what would they be saying today? What would be the attitude of, how would they welcome refugees fleeing from Syria? And I think we can be sure they would. What would be their attitude to the sale of council houses and the actual destruction of social housing in our country, and the handing over lock, stock and barrel of masses of accommodation of houses for people that was paid for by working people, handing it over to private landlords to exploit? They would be in the forefront of that. What would be their position in terms of Amazon? What would be their position when the worker, even in these straitened times, there's a building worker dies every week of the year? And this is in an era where we derisory hear health and safety held up as if it's something that's unnecessary and holding back production. I think we can be sure that they would be involved in all of these activities, they would be involved in all of these actions. And one of the things that the campaigning around Spain did was it brought together the different strands within the movement. You had the tenants movements in the east of Scotland, where they were actually taking in refugees from the Basque country. We had churches that were organising to send winter aid to Spain, and we had the International Brigaders who were leaving families, and those families had to be supported and had to be catered for. If we really want to remember the memory of those who went, and the figures, it's quite interesting that the International Brigade Association says there was 2,300. MI5 say that there was 4,000 went from Britain. I think they must have been counting those that went on the MI5 side as well as our brave people. But I think if we really want to honour them, what we have to do is we try and work towards the society that they were fighting for. Going to Spain in itself was not a revolutionary act. It was to protect a social democracy. But it showed that in an area of rising fascism, that even small limited gains that workers were gaining had to be challenged and had to be stamped down. As Simon pointed out, nearly all of the gains that we have made since the end of the Second World War, we have either lost them, we are losing them, or we're in danger of losing them. We need to organise, we need to fight against them. And we also need to be aware that there are other people who will offer easy answers. The xenophobes, the racists, the people who offer simple solutions of blaming the other and not recognising where the problem is. The problem is capitalism, and capitalism, if that's the answer, then it's a stupid question. What we need to do is come together. What the People's Assembly tries to do is bring together those in the workplace, those in the community, those in campaigning organisations, to recognise that that which unites us is more important than that which we maybe argue and question about. There is no yes or no campaign against austerity, there is only a campaign against austerity. The campaign for cuts has no badge, no flag. What was important is that we come together, and whether austerity is coming from Westminster, from Brussels, or even from Holyrood, it needs to be challenged and it had to be defeated. The International Brigaders, when they were fighting for education and for opportunities been there for working class children to have as much knowledge in their head as their head could hold, what would they be saying about the 140,000 college places that have been cut in Scotland in recent years? 30% of all the kids who were in those college places came from working class households. They would be opposing that. The welfare cuts that have been driven from Westminster, you know, and the hated ethos is the successor of the means test. That needs to be challenged. That can happen within the People's Assembly, and if we really want to honour them, get involved. Get involved in the People's Assembly, get involved in your union, get involved in your local trade union, campaign organisations. Get involved in the international solidarity actions that are taking place in support of a deposed president in Brazil, which has a resonance for Spain, and the repeated attempted coups against the elected government in Venezuela. These would all be very familiar to those who went to Spain, and we can't talk about history repeating themselves, but it does look very familiar. So get involved. A good place to start is that this time next week, the People's Assembly, in conjunction with United Left, are having a joint conference to address coming together. That which unites us is stronger than that which divides us. And immediately afterwards, the campaign Action Against Racism is having in the UNISON offices where we'll be later, about challenging the racism and how we welcome refugees and how we challenge the assumptions that the other is always to blame. We salute the men and women who went to Spain. We live in the here and now. Their fight is our fight, and our fight is to make the world that they wanted achievable. Thank you.